I always loved the idea of sculpture. I think being a two-dimensional artist, there's something about playing with a different dimension. Certainly with me, I love experimenting with my paintings and I love trying different materials, and I think sculpture has been another material to play with. It comes with its challenges, but it comes with its rewards as well at the same time. So the 3 sculptures I've done for the Jubilee collection, I've focused on the 3 main equine institutions that have formed this Jubilee year, which are the Household Cavalry, the King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, and the Royal Mews. The start of the sculpting process is very like painting. You've got to immerse yourself in the environment and really experience what you're trying to depict. I see it as like filling up the mind with ideas, and all that goes into a sketchbook, and then I can rush back to the studio and start sketching it down, and I rough out what I kind of envisage the sculpture being, but obviously two-dimensionally. After that, I make a small maquette. And this is just simply getting clay and just roughing out a rough idea of what the finished sculpture will look like. I start drawing out a more detailed diagram of what I'm trying to make, and from that diagram I will create the armature, which is the metal work which goes inside the sculpture. This, like your drawing for painting, is so important. The metal work is essentially the skeleton which will support the clay. So I spend a long time making the armature, lots of glue, lots of aluminium tying bits together, and then I go into forming the clay. And I try to, a bit like my painting, I try to be as loose and expressive as possible. I feel the minute you start overworking something, you lose that magic, you lose the energy behind it. The energy and movement were the key things that I wanted to portray with the Jubilee collection. So it goes into clay, and the clay pit can take a long time. A lot of the time I am getting measurements right. If the leg's too long or the head's too short, it looks very obvious. So I spend my life with calipers measuring heads and then measuring to my reference drawing. It's worth it in the end, and eventually you have your finished sculpture in clay. Take it to the foundry, and that is when the professionalism of the foundry comes through, because they then create a silicone mold of your clay sculpture. Take the silicone mold away and you're left with an exact replica of your clay sculpture, but in wax. Now this is quite a crucial part, because as an artist you come back and you get to see the wax model and you can do little tweaks here and there, or last minute changes before that's it, it's getting made into bronze. So I actually like to do quite a lot of work into the wax before it goes onto the next stage. So once you're happy with your wax, then it goes through to get dipped in a ceramic slurry, and this thing's like sand and glue, and it coats the wax, and it gets dipped again, coats, dipped again, coats, and you build up this shell, letting it dry in between, which you can then put in an oven, essentially. You can put in an oven and the wax will melt out, just leaving the hard shell in its place. And the final bit, and the most exciting bit, is when the hard shell is packed into sand and then molten bronze is poured into this hard shell. Very spectacular thing to witness. You let your bronze cool, and then you crack open your hard shell and you're left with your bronze sculpture then and there. The next stage is completely down to the foundry, and they are amazing at what they do. The chasing, and it's where they file bits there, weld bits there, tweak bits here to make it look exactly like the sculpture you started with. Often I'll kind of come in at the very end and see this brilliant thing that they've created out of bronze, and an exact replica of your clay sculpture. And then we go together and we patinate, and this is one of the most challenging parts, I think, of the sculpture making process. Which colours to go for. They can make and break a sculpture. I'm very keen to get the vibrant colours from my paintings into the sculpture. We spend a lot of time layering up, making decisions, taking patina back and then reapplying it until I'm 100% happy and the piece is complete. And it's always a very exciting time when you suddenly see it and you're like, yes, that's it. Perfect, stop. For the Household Cavalry, I wanted to focus on the drum horses. I'm fascinated by the drum horses and they come up a lot in my work. I wanted the drum horse to be depicted with as much movement as possible. The drum horse is on a rod, so it's nice and high in a kind of elevated position. Gives it a bit of gravitas, I feel, and serenity. I've kept it deliberately very loose, so lots of expressive marks here and there. Drama in kind of mid-flow. The key thing that I wanted to do was allow the legs to disappear, so you don't see any hooves, and it really adds to the movement of the piece. So there's a rhythm to it as you feel the legs moving. And then finally, the colour, this like great green in complete contrast with the bass, which is like dead black. I really love that style, and I've continued it for the troupe, for the 6 horses on the gun team who are kind of turning a corner. Again, I wanted lots of movement, so there's lots of marks here and there, and I think there's only kind of 4 legs touching the ground out of the whole sculpture. The less you actually show, the more you suggest, and the more it becomes an art piece and the more it becomes seen as a whole rather than individuals. So for the 6 horses of the gun team, that's really important to me, and I really wanted there to be a flow through the gun team as they turn that corner. It's such an exciting thing to see, all 6 horses and 3 people like all on a bend. I think I've captured that really well with the King's Troop piece, the Troop. The final sculpture, which is actually quite different from the others, is the Windsor Grey. For this, instead of adding lots of expressive marks and leaving bits out, I've really concentrated on smoothing everything down, so there's a bit of a flow to the piece. So the leg is not very separate from the saddle and the horse's flank. It kind of melds into one, but suggests, as you cast your eye over it, your eye kind of picks up on the flows and the undulations of the form. And it creates a really interesting piece. I think, again, it allows the viewer to really work and kind of enjoy interacting with the sculpture. There's no individual tack on the Royal Windsor Grey, but it suggests that there is tack there. So kind of the harness kind of stops halfway and then continues again, but then disappears into the flank of the horse. And I love that idea of the eyes just trained to see something which isn't there. They're all similar in what I'm trying to portray, which is trying to not create a depiction but suggest something. But they're all individual in their own little aspects. Photographing horses, they look awkward at the best of times. Painting them, they can look even more awkward if you don't get it right. But sculpting, because it's because of the 3D aspect of it, it has to be exactly right. And a leg that's too thin or a hoof that's the wrong shape can completely wreck the whole piece, even with expressive gestures and suggestions. I've learned so much, and it's really forced me to concentrate on the anatomy, which in turn has actually helped my painting. So it's been hard work, but it's been an amazing lesson and something quite great to concentrate on. Next year I am off to Kenya for a month and Australia for a month. So what I'm intending to do is take along some maquettes and do some sculpting from life. And what I really want to do is capture, again, like that sense of urgency that I already have in my sculpture, and capture it in the field, so then and there, and see if I can enhance the movement and the expressive strokes that already exist in my sculpture, but this time for wildlife. So a bit of a change from ceremonial horses to elephants and giraffe, but very much looking forward to it.